Danvers. We're going to start the March 4th, 2024 school committee. If we could please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Danvers Public Schools is a dynamic community of independent learners dedicated to respect, responsibility, creativity, and the pursuit of academic and personal excellence. This meeting is being broadcast on Danvers Community Access Television. Is there anyone else in the audience that is recording the proceedings? Okay, so today is part 2 of the budget hearing. And we will have time for public comment on the budget, but just before at the beginning, I didn't know if anyone had a comment that was not related to the budget. We have you, Mr. Zubrick, when the budget got you ready after the presentation. Okay. We'll have you come up after the presentation. I know you have budget questions, Mr. Zubrick. Okay. So, he's not even laughing.
He is now.
I'll make a comment now if you like.
Well, is it about the budget or no?
Everything's about the budget.
So we should wait then. We'll wait. Okay. Thank you. All right. So, do you want to begin?
Sure, I'll begin.
Okay.
So, just as a recap of our last presentation, just to sum everything up, the work of building the budget really is to meet the needs of the students. It's a collaborative process. We work with our leadership, our schools, our departments. We reviewed the work of this past year and looking at needs to sustain growth for next year. So our budget proposal is put together, and I'll lay out the key pieces. And last time we had schools and departments give presentations, but I broke this all into this particular presentation. So as the process goes, we're in March, so we had our workshop at the end of February. That was very helpful, great feedback, presentations by our departments and by our schools to give their input in terms of the budget ask for next year. Lots of great dialogue and recommendations from the school committee, so I did put that together within this presentation. Currently we're at the hearing to approve or move forward the budget to the select board for the next public hearing, then on to the FinCom town meeting, and next thing you know, July 1 will be here and we start a new fiscal year. So the key focus for us is a level service budget so that we provide the services for our students and staff as they are. The priorities are student and staff support, special education and ESSER positions in mind, the changing student needs and staffing post-pandemic, as well as positions that are funded by ESSER are in place and have been successful for stabilizing our schools. This also connects to our district improvement plan and strategic plan for safe and supportive learning environments. The ESSER positions are very key in that, along with developing and implementing coherent curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So the priority and needs in terms of the collaborative process, the schools did reach out to their faculties, they reached out to the school councils, and several cycles of review and priorities took place. We met many times as an administrative team just to go through and really highlight the priorities and then start to map out what maybe this year can bring and the next 2 years afterwards. Really looked hard at our budget lines and supplies and really looked at ways to maximize our personnel and a lot of collaboration with the town. We do face many budget pressures. Our Chapter 70 funding is not at the level that we received this year. It's less, and it's due to several factors, such as a lower inflation rate, and that plays into it to a big piece. We did receive a little bit more on just the foundational budget because our enrollment has gone up, which is good news. But the other thing that's really important to understand is the ESSER positions that will be facing a major decision. The ESSER funding runs out September 20th or September 30th, 2024, and we need to determine which positions will carry over to the operating budget. And that was a big part of our work and continues to be so. Also balancing the out-of-district placement costs. Also, we are faced with an increase for the Northeast Collaborative Consortium. There's been an increase due to their HVAC project that all 20 members are facing, and that has about 19 of our students there. Transportation costs have been increasing. We know not only from just in general for school transportation, but for special education And those contracts really have been difficult to manage. The percentages are going up and up. Really become a major issue we need to deal with. Curricular needs, new programming at the elementary level, contractual obligations, we're currently bargaining with all 4 units, and just the general inflationary increases. So when we look at our resources, we took a good hard look at our ESSER funding and reallocation and tried to be budget neutral whenever possible. We look at attrition of staff, if the retirements and resignations, collapsing positions not filled, and really looking at the budget lines through contracted services to maximize what we have to improve our programming in the areas of social workers, special education teachers, language-based teacher, a BCBA, which is a board-certified behavior analyst, which is a huge position for us. As I said, the ESSER funding runs out September 30th, and there were a lot of positions on the ESSER funding over time. We obviously can't move them all, so it's a matter of prioritizing what we need to move forward. For example, a special education coordinator, reading specialists, instructional technicians, and hall monitors. And non-salaried items. If we can defer non-salaried needs when possible, such as curriculum, technology, and supplies, we can utilize that funding to offset so that's not a piece that comes out of our budget this year and helps bring down the ask. So further review, transportation is a major issue. We are looking to add 2 vans for extracurriculars. Currently we have 1 van, and that's going to prove to be very helpful where we can provide transportation for small runs, such as the tennis team this spring. A group went to the MIA this past Friday. So instead of renting out and paying for a bus or a van, we can use this ourselves. We have that at our disposal, and we're looking to add a 2nd van. We also received, are about to receive, they're in 2 7D vans. We just need to find 2 more drivers, but that will help our fleet too, where that would be less of leasing transportation. But also the in-district transportation we reviewed quite heavily, because there are some cases where that transportation is no longer legally required, so that will free up resources too. And we also looked at a way and a plan to be collaborative with the NEC to create a program where we can cost share over time. It's a 2-year program where we can go in to develop in Plan 1, really outline our transportation needs for out-of-district placements, and year 2 create a pilot that we would partner with neighboring districts, for example, Peabody, Beverly, and Salem, to transport students that might be on the way to out-of-district placements with the potential savings of 10% or more. So that's something that we said we'd be actively involved with and participate in. And also really looking at the cost of building programming for our autism program, autism spectrum disorder, TLC, therapeutic and language-based programming, right? At this point, those are the 3 big drivers of our out-of-district placement costs that we need to bring under control in order to stabilize the budget, as well as transportation. And the elementary class size, we really took a good hard look at our class sizes, ways we can adjust according to each school. And really at this point, we've done an analysis on this and know that the Smith capacity is big enough to bring in more students. And looking at the flex zone to see if we can make adjustments to move more students into that Smith area to take pressure off Highlands and Great Oak and Thorpe. Also looking at a kindergarten placement in the spring, looking at the flex zone where maybe we can bring more students in now, and that plan is in the works as we speak. But a big offshoot of that is our special education programming and the realignment, the consolidation of programming. Currently at 3 of our schools, at Smith, Thorpe, and Riverside, we have our specialized programming. We're looking to add 1 school, Great Oak, for language-based, although that might be a 2-year rollout. Highlands cannot house a specialized program, there's just no capacity. So the program realignment, we think, will really maximize the resources, having the programs under 1 roof. And we look to really roll this out next year, but really, some cases, it'll be a 2-year rollout. We have quite a bit of grant funding to help stabilize and meet our students' needs, to an acceleration grant, Innovation Pathways, which is at the high school, 8 Discovery Program, which is innovative programming, health and wellness, SEL grants, different grants that we've put in for. We'll put in as many as we can to bring the monies into our school so that we can utilize this to offset budgetary costs. And the Emergency Assistance Program, which is in place now, is a separate funding mechanism. That is not reflected in our budget. We receive funding from the state, $1,000 per student, and $104 per day per student. That will receive all through till June 30th. So the extra positions, such as our different teacher aides, instructional support, social worker, That's all funded through the state under this program or after-school program, and any curriculum and communication devices. That's all being funded, and that's a considerable amount. Next year, we'll wait for the state budget. We had a meeting today. We have a weekly meeting with the shareholders, and Sally Cairns was on there, and she's an advocate for making sure that we have funding moving forward to support the program if it's there. So that's really important. Strategic planning for the future, it's important that we keep working for a safe and supportive learning environment, or coherent curriculum instruction, engage students. The planning will begin. Our strategic plan expires this year, so we need to develop a plan for the next 3 years, and that work will start later this spring into the summer. And a current review of our programming to really understand the sustainability and to be fiscally responsible, looking at ways to improve our special education program, looking at out-of-district placements, ways we can reduce that, and savings of transportation to stabilize our current situation. I have a slide that will show you that if we don't take action now, right, you'll see the increase just over the last 5 years that really is putting us in a tough situation. And looking to reallocate staffing when possible, as we talked with attrition, ways we can utilize that to move staffing to provide needs as the needs have changed over time. So our forward planning, we tried to break this down into 3 years, and this will be more refined in years 2 and 3 as we strategically plan, as we create that plan. But more importantly, right now the focus is stabilizing our schools with continued ESSER positions, bringing them to the operation budget, and improving the special education programming with the goal of really keeping the out-of-district placement costs leveled and look to bring them down so we can sustain the programming to improve over time. And these are really serious positions that we've already put into place. Our social workers, special education teachers, we have our BCBAs, which are critical, behavior techs, instructional techs, aides. All these go into place that we need these positions to help keep our schools stable and also really take the stress off the out-of-district placements. Again, and it's not said with that we don't want out-of-district placements. Students should get what they need by law and morally, but more importantly, we have programs that exist that we can improve. In years 2 and 3, we know that we want to add items, and that may be more possible if we stabilize where we're at in the budget in terms of those costs that are escalating. So going into the special education, this is the slide that shows you in FY18, the actual cost when you break down our special education costs was a little over $5 million. If you move that over to 23, the actual, now you're progressing well over close to $9 million. Our projected for the budget this year is over $10 million. So you look at a short period of time, just the doubling of the costs, and looking at that purple, which is the circuit breaker, which is the offset that we receive for additional funding. There's a formula for that. I don't want to get into that now, but the bottom line is that really is a reserve that is used for rainy days, and it's only to be used really limited in cycles, right? It's to offset a cycle, and you move forward. And if you look, we're looking to add quite a bit of circuit breaker into this budget to bring down the cost with the ask that we need to stabilize. So I think this is a telling thing. It goes back to if we don't take action now, if we sit and wait, I think the costs are too great, and I think we'll have serious issues to deal with next year. That's why it's so important really to be focused on what we're asking for this year. So if you look at the special education programming under the 3 strands of autism, therapeutic, language-based, those are the 3 highest areas of need and 3 programs that we currently have. And by improving these programs, the goal is to, again, stabilize out of district, but also improve the programming to hopefully students will come back and, again, reduce those placements to save where we're at. We presented to the town earlier this year, or I guess it was back in September, a considerable, I think, a well-thought-out plan that was substantially higher than this. It was well over 1.2 million was the overall plan, but we realized we can't do that all in 1 year. So we looked at areas that can we effectively put into place and add to, and currently positions we have on ESSER and move them around to build these programs. And that's why if you add the BCBA, we have shared that we might be able to make that budget neutral with some money in contracted services, special education with AST endorsement, the technicians and social workers, that comes to the amount of $570,000. And if you look at a 3-year plan, it's boiling down the larger plan we presented in September to to break it down with our strands, our ASD language-based, as well as our therapeutic, and looking that we believe that as the cohorts move through, we'll start to bring more attention to the high school in the next 2 years with the Falcon's Edge, which is a alternative programming that may help us with those students transitioning and bring students back and develop a more robust language-based program. The cohort's real small now, so the emphasis is less there, but we feel it will increase over the next 2 to 3 years. Ultimately, carry over what we can through ESSER to help with capital improvements as we move some of our programming. For example, the pre-K to Riverside, if we can capture that money and get that in place to improve facilities, bathrooms, and play area, as well as other capital improvements that may be needed at Smith or at Thorpe as well. So those are important things. And moving forward to year 2 and 3, the big piece will be, again, carry over the capital improvements, but also look to explore the structure of adding team chairs to each level, which I think will bring a greater level of stability to the schools with special education programming. So quite frankly, if you look at the total cost, the non-salary requests, which are out-of-district placement and out-of-district transportation, and we're estimating 5% increase. We reduced that estimation based on inflationary pressures and what we're feeling through the industry. That in itself is a pretty big piece of this ask for the increases. Supplies, materials, and contracts, we may be able to offset some of that with ESSER funding. Special education program requests, building the programming, the critical positions for ESSER, and then the contractual obligations all come to a total of over $5.6 million. The offset on that, which I think is important, is the circuit breaker funding, which we're looking to put a considerable amount in, larger than we've ever put in, $2 million, to bring down to offset the cost, deferring items to ESSER, which we have that funding, let's utilize it. Looking to increase the pre-K tuition. We just completed a audit of our pre-K programming, and it does substantiate that we can increase the tuition to a reasonable rate that's competitive with our peer areas with the quality of service that we provide. Also looking for ways that we can save with in-district transportation. Again, services not needed for some students, but also a lower projected rate based on that. What's not included in there is the acquisition of the 2 vans for extracurriculars, as well as the 2 other 7D vans. And as well as staffing, we know that we have overages with retirements and collapsing unfilled positions and attrition, so we know the overage meaning if somebody's going out at a higher rate, bringing somebody in at a first, second, or third year of experience, which will be less of a salary. So when you bring this all together and you break down the proportion of the budget, most of the budget in any school district will be primarily salaries and personnel, with 10.8 special education costs, and that's after the circuit breaker offset. We'd like to reduce that over time, and transportation costs, which we want to lower them as well. So our fixed costs are 95% of this budget. Again, most of the expenditure is on our staffing. If you look at our per pupil expenditure, it is a little bit lower than the state. And I think the key piece here with the cost, because once you take away the contractual obligations, once you take away the special education obligations that we have, the bigger chunk of this is coming into moving these ESSER positions that are critically needed to stabilize where we are in terms of the technicians, specialists, the hall monitor, for those positions. We also listen closely to the school committee recommendation and ways to look at how can we bring back the math interventionist at the middle school. So really, right now, the work is incumbent on us. We have where we're at with the budget, but it's incumbent on us to look at ways that if we're looking to add anything, now it's at the point where we need to really look hard at reallocation. We're able to accomplish that to add a math interventionist coach at HRMS next year in this proposal. Also, part of the positions looking to add that we currently have that have really stabilized in critical situations are BCBA social workers and our special education teachers, and that total again is $570,000. And we did collapse a number of positions that allows us to provide the best staffing that we can at where we're at this level. So our proposed budget's $51,990,348. So when you take the proposed increase in offsets, it's a $3.1 million increase of a 6.41 increase this year. And if you look at statistically over time, our 12-year average is 3.66. It is a higher percentage, but as I stated earlier, we're in a critical situation with our ESSER positions and stabilizing special education that are much needed in order to sustain where we're going into the future. That's the presentation.
Thank you. Okay, so we will open it up to public comment. Bart, you want to do public comment?
School committee questions
first?
typically
Okay.
first, yeah.
Okay. Questions? Anyone?
I mean, I'll start.
You can start.
I went through the budget, obviously, in a lot of detail, and the workshop was very helpful, because I didn't really see anything in the budget that we hadn't discussed in the workshop, and I was glad to see the math interventionist moved into the budget itself. Everything else was pretty much as explained in the workshop, and the reasons therefore were presented by the staff that you presented to us, Tom. So I would compliment the way the budget was put together. Kudos to your entire staff and everybody in your office who helped put this together. Everybody was terrific, and we appreciate it. And I know, just having sat with Pam for some negotiation sessions, how much additional work this has all been. So, and also to the principals and everybody who worked on this. Having said that, I think we have faced over the last couple of years the fact that there are two real areas of growing pressure. One is that since COVID, we have seen an increase in the behavioral needs of students, and also sort of a generalized increased pressure on special ed costs. And the last 2 years, we've gone to the town for substantial amounts to cover additional special education costs, largely due to out-of-district placements. We recognized that there was an issue. And last year, when the town essentially increased the budget beyond what we requested a little bit, I think it was incumbent upon us in the course of those discussions to recognize that we had to do something to bring down the out-of-district costs if possible. And we all recognized that the services that we were going to provide had to be top flight. The students have to get what they need, as you said, Dan. But we know that we have to do it. So as I look at the budget, you have, okay, the attention on special education and development of new programs, which will hopefully reduce some of the pressure on the out-of-district programming. And then the ESSER-funded positions seem to be largely aimed at helping support the emotional and mental health of students, which again, since the pandemic, which was no fault of anyone, it has put more pressure on what we are doing in the schools. And so I looked at the budget. I understand where the numbers come from. I don't have specific questions on particular line items. I've got to trust that if you're bringing in a particular curriculum, and we discussed this at the workshop, that you're making the right choice and will follow up appropriately. So I'm not going to try and nitpick on what particular curriculum you've chosen or cost of supplies, that sort of thing. So I don't have line item questions on the budget. I think you have brought in a responsible budget. I know you've worked with the town, and I think you'll certainly have my support on the budget. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think Eric brings up a good point, and I did the same thing. I reviewed the budget, and you guys are close to it more tactically, you and your team. So I think I don't have, again, I'm not really in a position to kind of go line item by line item, but I am happy with the bolstering of the special ed budget, that $570K, to try to see if we can reduce those out-of-district placements. And overall, I mean, that's where the majority of our costs kind of get out of control at some point. So if we can continue to look at that, and I just want to take a look at that, if this does go through as is, with that, what does that $570K do over the long term, and are we able to recover some of those costs? And then if we can come up with that and say, okay, if we continue to, maybe we throw another $100,000 at it next year or something. I'm just throwing these arbitrary numbers out there to see if we can continue to reduce that spending over the course of the next 5 years, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that it is to Eric, to echo what Eric said. I think it's a responsible budget, and I like that we're trying to come in at budget neutral or as close to budget neutral as possible. But, you know, I just want to keep an eye on it and see over the next several years what that does, especially around that special ed. So, good. That's it.
Was there a question in there?
There was not, it was a comment.
Comment.
Oh, okay, it's just a
Comment.
comment. I was just wondering if there was a question in there. No, I mean, again, and we've had some side conversations about this, but really happy to look at this and go line by line, and, I mean, really, all of the key increases around special education and support personnel, which are really driving all of our out-of-district costs, and I'm just wondering, you know, just from, you know, if there's any anecdotal commentary you can make in regards to the immediate loss of, like, the ESSER personnel that we've been able to have over the last few years. Like, take that out of the equation, what's the immediate impact?
Well, that immediate impact would be some positions that were hired, such as some social workers in key areas, technicians, monitors, aides, and teachers that, quite frankly, we were in positions where we needed to put staffing that met levels that would provide the services for students. Otherwise, we were looking at students that, there may have been cases for students that could have made the argument to go out of district. And so those are immediate pieces. So I think those are really important for that. And I think, you know, as the principals are working to build more capacity, we need to provide those services and those resources for them. So those are some critical positions. So again, we you know, try to be as cautious as we can, knowing that the funding will end. But, you know, we were in a tough spot in a couple cases.
Okay, would you happen to have like a top of mind number in regards to, you mentioned out of district potential? Like, if we didn't have the ESSER staff that we had, would there have been an immediate impact this year or next year in regards to out of district?
I think there, you know, I don't want to speculate on a specific number, but I will tell you that there would be cases for that.
Okay.
How
And-
many positions did we have with ESSER? Because that's a good question,
Okay.
too. No, I wanted, now that you brought that up, like, how many positions have been filled?
So there were 30 overall,
30
but
overall, okay.
we've come down way from that, so there were a number not filled, and we're not looking to move all of them over, not even close
But
to
it was
that.
substantial.
It was substantial
Yeah,
at time,
okay.
but there's been attrition to some of those positions. Some of them just weren't filled. We did collapse a few to add a social worker, and a couple of other technicians at times, so we tried to be mindful of that, knowing that at some point this is going to not carry over.
And I think my question is really in regards to, you know, the cost of not doing something. So when we talk about, you know, the ESSER funding that we got and the students that we, you know, we want to prevent out-of-district placements, I think in slides a few months ago, I mean, the average out-of-district placement is what, $60,000, $70,000?
It's over that, depending
over
on which
that.
strand, yes, and if you include transportation, it could be well over 100,000.
Per student?
Yes.
So hypothetically, 2023, how many of those were we able to keep in district because of the funding that we've used?
That's kind of a tough question based on some situations, but, you know, because each case has its own nuance to it, but substantial, I can tell you that.
Would you say 10 students or 5 students?
Somewhere in that
So we're
vicinity.
talking about $1 million
Possibly.
at a cost to us of like 300,000?
I mean, it would depend on where things go, but it's substantial. Because any one, again, if we can't provide what they need, they get what they need, which is important. So if we don't have those items in place, then yes, those could be out-of-district placements that, you know, again, if you talk 1, 2, 3, that's easily getting up to 300,000-400,000.
And sorry, last question.
Sure.
For every additional staff member, hypothetically, how many out-of-district placements do we prevent? I just like to put numbers around things, like so.
Yeah, and I can go back to give you, so we did an analysis of what that would be with the initial presentation, because we try to do, and it's tough when you're talking humans,
Right.
right, to make a cost analysis, but we did a pretty good presentation in terms of, you know, numbers of, if we made the major investment, what that might bring back to bring a break-even point, and I can certainly send that to you. I have no problem sharing that. I know we'll be at the select board as well, and I can bring that slide back, but it's substantial, you know.
All right, so in a simpler way, what is the cost of, like, this one additional staff from the ESSER fund? Like, just one person?
So depending on the.
Depending on the
So
position.
if it's a teacher or if it's a social worker, it's somewhere in the vicinity of 65, 70,000, depending where they may fall on the scale. That might be
Right.
not as much.
So that one
experience.
person already offsets around $40,000 in cost
if
if we lose
possibly
one
can.
student to out of district?
Possibly
Okay,
can,
all right,
yes.
thank you. That's what I was
Absolutely.
trying to get to. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
That's all my
Yeah,
questions.
and we can go back to if like we have
Yeah.
additional.
Oh, yeah,
like, so
absolutely,
don't feel like it's,
absolutely.
like,
I mean, my
beyond
big
my
thing
realm.
is, the investment and what are we
Yeah.
potentially getting back? And if, if we're thinking about, 3 or 4 staff members at, let's say, $60,000, I mean, we're spending $240,000, and if that saves 4 students, I mean, we're still net positive. So, I mean, that's why, going line by line and having this information,
Yep.
it's incredibly responsible, and I think it pays for itself over time.
It does, and I wish I had that slide in there from the original, even though
Yeah,
we're not.
that's why I was reflecting on
Yeah.
that, and I brought that back up.
We're not asking for that full amount that we presented earlier. We were asking basically a little less than half, but bringing that back, we broke it down by each strand what the, investment might net if, X amount of students would stay in our schools.
Right.
'Cause that's the ultimate goal. So again, I don't want to give numbers that aren't accurate from that presentation, but I'm happy to bring that, and I'll add that to the presentation to the select board.
Can I try one more question?
Of course.
If we were to get everything that's on that slide, is there any hypothetical around how many students we could bring back immediately? Or, well, maybe keep, or is that too big of a hypothetical?
Well, I think that the one caution with this is that there may not be an immediate return
Right, but over
immediately,
time.
but over time, and that's where it kind of gets into that return on that investment, depending where we're at. Because if you look, this is not the full amount, but enough to keep building the programs where we are and go further. So hopefully, I think the real key is being able to stabilize and start to bring costs down in these other areas without coming back to asking for more. And then that's where you get into the reallocation of where you start to save, and then you start to see if you can reposition some more positions to add over the course of 2 to 3 years. I think that's the real key. Because the fruition coming out, it'd be nice to say you would have a direct correlation on year 1, and we're hoping for that. But I know we're really trying to prevent the going out piece. The part that I think is important is to be able to create programs where people want to come back. And I think that's the goal, and we presented that earlier. It's, people want to be in their hometown, they want to be in their home district. And to be in the high school that offers activities and items that they might not get at a private placement. I think that really is key and very attractive, in being with your peer group. And that's the growth. It's, to put that in a particular year is a little tough, but ultimately that's what we want to do, because, to keep projecting out and keep adding, it's a difficult thing. But if we stabilize and start to bring down, that creates a cushion that we can build even further. And the point that's important is that we may be able to attract others from other tuition-in students at some point. If we're able to develop programs that are strong, that's where you get into an opportunity to tuition students in from other districts. And that does happen, and you can do that. And we actually have a potential budget-neutral piece that we talked about for hearing impaired that may be able to work, and it's budget neutral as we look at it. And building something like that can have a huge cost. But again, you have to have the staffing to even consider that, because that puts a lot of stress, but if you're in a good position, that's a potential payoff as well down the road. And I think the transportation is really, really important. So that collaborative part, I think, is huge, because that in itself is now sharing costs with other towns to bring down that particular piece, and building internally, what can we do to bring down our cost as well. I think even just adding those 2 vans, it may sound small, that's huge. But can we do more of things like that? And that's the area, the direction we want to head. So we can do more for ourselves.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so a couple questions. Highlands is bulging at the seams. We know we can't add any more there.
Yep.
And do we have almost 400 kids? How many is there?
Close to 400.
Okay, and then
380.
380. And what are we at Smith right now? 370.
370.
I knew you would know. Okay, so we can't add any more to Highlands.
No.
Smith, obviously, we can add because of the actual physical space that we have available. I just get concerned with numbers that high to have like one administrator in the building. I totally understand that we need these, like all the positions we're proposing are really union, positions, which are obviously very important because they're with the kids, directly, but adding to Smith makes me a little bit nervous without the additional as far as administrator support. Like Ms. Powers can only do so much, Mr. Obrensky can only do so much. And at one point do we say, okay, like where is their additional support?
Mhm.
Because like, they're drowning. They're not gonna tell us what they are. And I don't know if how you guys feel about that, but that always is concerning to me.
And certainly happy to, if it's okay, with your
Yeah.
permission, to, absolutely. Knowing that we are going to, we put a pause on adding the kindergarten to Smith this year, because we're gonna use those fundings to help stabilize special education as we're moving, some more programming and more students into Smith that are high needs. Over time, again, back to Gabe's point, if we're able to build this, that will give us capacity to reallocate and start to add. That term team chair is really a placeholder to
Okay.
provide. That could provide the relief at the school-based level. Right now, the elementary has one coordinator for 5 schools.
Right.
That's a lot. So how do you provide more coverage? If you could build a team chair type model, and I don't want to speculate now, we haven't finished our analysis, and we will have a presentation in terms of looking at reorganization. That is a potential area that could bring a lot of return to take pressure off at the building level.
Because I feel like Danvers has always been really light as far as like middle management piece for years, and I mean, we know the importance of that. So I just would really like to keep that,
And that's,
on the forefront.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, because we did talk as an administrative team in terms of supporting and where we're at on that piece, and the realization is that the priority right now is stabilizing and being able to bring these key positions in and then start to build. And those are areas, as we start to talk with strategic planning and where we're going for the future, those are certainly real important items that should be brought into the discussion.
Right, because we have strong leaders, and I would not like to lose any of them because they're at capacity mentally, which I understand.
Yeah, and to your point
So-
too, it's just trying to what's that balance? That, I know we're asking a lot. I totally know that, and I know we're doing the best that we can to utilize resources and offset with ESSER. So we really want it to be as responsible as we can coming into a large, ask this year. But knowing, again, if we build this, hopefully that will give us the capacity down the road to take some stress off of those schools.
Okay.
And also those flex zones to try to move things around too, we hope.
Right, okay, thank you. So as far as a line item, as far as curriculum, I know we're not asking a huge amount as far as curriculum money, but just looking at, I know Carnegie Math at the middle and high school, those are like curate models approved by DESE, so that's really great. I guess my question is more focused on the elementary curriculum, and I ask that because for a few reasons. So number one, ST Math is not approved by DESE, and neither is the new curriculum fish tank that you guys are asking money for. And I guess my just wondering is why are we buying a new curriculum that's not approved by DESE? I guess would be my first question.
It actually is.
It is?
Yeah,
Did
it's
it
on the
change
Curate.
to
It's on the-
match
it's-
fish
it's got-
tank?
It's got match fish tank, and it's on the website for Curate.
Oh, so
Julie
that just-
Bostonak and I looked today, so it is on there, and it is been approved, it's acceptable in Gateway 1 and 2, which is a requirement for DESE.
Okay, so the links to the website for Fish Tank and then the one on Curate takes you to 2 different websites, because Fish Tank takes you to like Match Charter School.
Right, because they're the ones that developed it.
Okay.
They, with some researchers, developed it.
Okay, and so they start in 2021? And where are we as far as where other districts are with that? Because that's less than a 3-year curriculum, and I'm wondering how other districts are rolling out with that.
No, it's a K to 5. It's actually a K to 6, 8.
Wait, but it's only been 3 years, right?
Yeah. that's
So
it.
I'm not wondering how other districts who are not like piloting, but who are like actually adopted the curriculum, local districts, where we are with that and how
We'd have
that's
to,
going.
I didn't look into as much as Julie Pasternak and her team did look at that, but there are other districts that are using it, and Curate and Ed Reports have rated both of them, meeting the standards that they set forth. So we were confident in that. The teachers piloted it along with CKLA and EL, and this was the one that they overwhelmingly voted on to adopt.
Okay, and the other questions I have, just looking at it, that there are a lot of sensitive topics in it, especially like in 4th and 5th grade. And I was looking at the text, And a lot of those texts, when I taught high school, were in the high school curriculum, so I'm wondering why
Well,
we're
they were
reading.
in the middle school curriculum?
No, they
Yeah.
were in the high school
Because they're
curriculum.
in our Danvers, they were
Yeah.
in the middle school curriculum, so we've had conversations with the middle school on bringing, that we are adopting those texts, and so we've worked on a transition for that, so they're
Well, my
aware of that.
concern is that it's actually too heavy. Like, a lot of them talk about
It's
police
more-
brutality, they talk, some of the language is very, very strong for fourth and fifth graders, and I have to say, and I brought this up before, we were under the impression with the cultural read-alouds that the teachers had extensive training. That is why we said, okay, let's not pause them. That was not the case.
Well, it
And
has
now,
been, it's
but by
just to
Julie has
who's-
been the training, she's not
Not
a
just Julie, we've
professional.
had the Department of Education in.
How
we've
many
had Zaretta-
times?
I mean, we've had Camilla Drummond in, we've also had in,
With the teachers, one-on-one.
yes, and we had someone from Teachers College, I can't think of her name right now, but she came in and did a Zoom, virtual training for an early release. So it's been over 2 years that we've been doing this work, so all along the way, when we've done the culturally responsive, we've brought experts in. Last March, we brought in the gender identity people to come in, so that both Desi and then authors of a book that, who have a child that has transitioned, so they are experts in it, so they were talked to the faculty. So I feel like we've done that training more than what some people are perceiving.
Well, that's interesting, because at the last meeting, Julie said she's the one that's been doing it for the last
Well,
couple years.
she adds on to that, but we've had experts, and Julie and her team have been trained by outside experts themselves, so that they are then, it's kind of like a train-the-trainer model. They, in turn, bring it back into and train the teachers. But we did have experts come in and talk over the last couple of years.
Okay, Mike, I mean, the curriculum is heavy, and I feel like none
It
of the
is.
books are like happy. Like, I think about the
Oh.
kids that are reading, they're like dark.
Not all of them are dark.
Well,
I
they
really
all
don't-
deal with
I feel like
sensitive
if I could pull up
topics.
some of the books, I just think.
Like,
well, some-
especially the older, like, that's heavy, and I get nervous about where are we, like, is the fourth and fifth grader ready to read about police
me-
brutality in Black Panther? It's like, there's whole units on that.
That's only a small part of that book. It's really, there's other content in that
I
book
looked
that
at
you're
every
talking
single
about.
one listed, and I read them. That was linked. I mean, we're talking about 2 units in some of the grades that are civil rights, which I'm not saying that's unimportant,
Right,
but it
it's
is
aligned to the
heavy.
social studies civic standards.
Right, but it's
so we
very
are doing-
heavy.
So
And
I
that
feel
makes me
like
nervous.
it is our next step. We have been doing culturally responsive text read alouds, but also we need to look at our curriculum and have a culturally responsive curriculum. And lots of districts in Massachusetts are moving this way. If you look at the Massachusetts state standards, those culturally responsive work is in there. And that is what we use, helped us look at these programs, and that's what this fish tank is. We are ready to take that next step and have that in our curriculum.
I just want to make sure that the teachers are getting the support that they
We will.
need, because I've heard a lot of concerns from teachers that they're not getting it.
Okay, we will make sure
So,
we
and I
we
know
are,
they
we have
don't wanna
more
come
training
across as a
planned, because
union.
again, this was a pilot year, so
Yeah.
as we move to adopt, that training's coming over the summer, and we will make sure that they have that training. that they
Yeah, and
need.
I think the parents need to also be very well aware of what's, because the content is deep, and I think they need to know. And we send out this thing about cultural read-alouds, but it's all these links you have to go through, where it just should be like, March, we're reading about this.
I feel,
This is
yeah, I
it.
feel like we're trying to be transparent, though, and give you all the information that you want, so the people that want to research this can take those links, and I think we've had somebody
The
that has.
links are not user-friendly. You have to go through them to really look at it. It's like, you should just say, March, we're reading about this is the topic. April, it's all these clicks, and it does not feel transparent. As far as, ST math, that's not.
ST Math is a supplemental program to
Okay.
investigations, which is our core
So
program.
that's our core program,
And ST
okay.
Math is funded by the 1-8 Foundation, so we're not spending our budget money on it.
Okay.
And a lot of school districts in Massachusetts use it, and it really helps. It's been correlated to improvement on the MCAS, and I feel like that has helped us with our MCAS scores in Massachusetts
Okay.
over the years.
Okay. All right, I think I don't have any other questions. I don't know. People.
I had one more.
Yeah.
Chair. Just on the EAP, Emergency Assistance Program, I know that funding comes from the state for
Correct.
that. Does that cover all of our costs, or, it seems the numbers seem to be going up versus down for what we're receiving in Danvers. Is there going to be a point where we're gonna need to tap into our budget to cover these costs?
The hope is no, because at this point, we believe that, we're at capacity. And we've expressed that to Desi, we've expressed that to Sally, we've expressed that to the other players in the whole organization. So we are maxed, and so are the facilities as well. So the priority right now really is for the students that are here, and the funding for that has provided those extra positions that we've put into place, as well as the communication devices, and also there is some PD and some opportunities that the state has for certifications too, for teachers of our L students. So, I mean, the big question, and this is a surprise, but I did talk to Sally and asked her if she and Joan Lovely would come to our April 8th meeting to present, an update from the state where things are going, and I did say that that'll be a big question that I'm sure will come up in terms of, because every superintendent's asking that question in the Commonwealth, because we know that the funding ends on July 30th. We also know that any funding not utilized, we can carry that over how the grant is constructed. So we've already received an installment, and we have another installment coming, and we'll have another one toward the end of the year. So that's a critical question, because obviously, to go beyond June 30th, I can't answer that question.
Right.
I feel awkward not being able to.
Sure.
But the hope is that funding will continue, and knowing that that's a critical piece of that, and not knowing where the program will go after June 30th.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, and it's a little bit of what Robin alluded to with the administrative burden and the additional students that are going in, and I've always reconciled that. And again, I'm not an administrator. I'm not making any assumptions about what happens in the building. But given the presentations from all the schools and everything that we've seen in presentations, my assessment was that these additional resources would relieve a lot of the burden. In fact, there were some specific examples from Holton Richmond
Yes.
of the office not being burdened because the students who were dysregulated or something else was
Yep.
going on had a place to go. So I'm trying to square, and I don't know if it's a dialogue, but like, are we okay at an administrative level? And are these additional funds to bring in more social workers and specific specialists going to alleviate some of the extras that an administrator would have to cover because we're short on resources?
Well, I can tell you directly, yes. So just the addition of a social worker at the secondary level, that individual can certainly triage situations that maybe the assistant principals and principal might, or whoever's available, school counselors. That is a huge addition to any team, and I know at the middle school, they desperately need that. And I know that from personal experience where I was before, just being able to add that staffing, because that's our job, is to not only regulate the building, but when that pops up, we have to deal with that immediately. So that doesn't take away from work, because that is the work. But yes, those positions that are there, that is for stabilizing. And to not have those continue, I think then would increase the burden that's already there.
Okay.
Right, it's already tough as it is, but these do alleviate that for sure.
So and then a follow-up to that is, I do know we currently have teachers that act as assistant principals that are doing double duty. And is that sustainable, or is that temporary?
So that in itself, so the assistant to the principal, that's a stipend. They do some duties, their main duty is teaching. In terms of looking at that person to be as a true administrator, no. I mean, that person is an extension of the principal for a lot of things, for organizational and stuff. So I think, to Robin's point, overall, at the end of the day, yes, is there an opportunity to start to build this? And I believe we should. I just don't think right now is the time in terms of the immediate needs that we have, but I think it needs to be in our strategic planning moving forward for that piece. But yeah, those positions, I believe, do take a lot of stress off. I've seen it when I've been in the buildings, and even at the elementary level, adding the social workers, that is a critical help, because ordinarily who will deal with that may be, if you have a special educator that's free at that time, or the principal, so that way that does alleviate that.
Okay, so it's fair to say that the additional resources should create less of an urgent need for a teacher to leave the classroom to address some kind of disruption in the building. I just want to make sure I'm thinking about this the right way.
Well, it certainly would allow, so if the principal's doing instructional leadership work, if there's something that comes up that needs their immediate need, they're going to leave that duty to take care of that piece. So the addition of these positions, the ones that we have, that in itself will alleviate that pressure so the principals can do that work. That's woefully needed, as we know. But yes, theoretically, that could be the case too for any staff, having those additional positions. And I know even at the high school, you've seen it when we toured, just having that presence, it just does a lot to keep the building calm, which is important.
All right, thank you
Because
for that.
ultimately, if it's not, then it's hard to be in a learning situation, right? Where everybody's focused on just getting things back to stabilized.
Thanks for the clarification.
Gabe, where my numbers came from in my head was I was thinking, okay, so the high school, right, has like 800 kids, and they have obviously principal, 2 assistant principals, and then I know that Peter doesn't deal with discipline, but like, and an AD, essentially, so kind of like 5, right? And then I'm thinking in the elementary school has Ellen, which I know is curriculum, but then 2 assistant principals, and then a principal, and then at the elementary, we just have a principal. That's where my
No,
mind was going.
And that's why I wanted
Yeah.
to follow up on that. It's
Yeah.
like, I could see that benefit in the middle and high. Does the same go downstream? And it
Yeah,
sounds like it.
Yeah.
there's multiple ways to approach that piece, but we really felt like right now with the immediate part, being able to, that would be, that in itself, I believe, needs some strategic work, but certainly understanding, I think we're on common ground, understanding that we need to build this so we can build those reliefs in for sure.
Thank you.
It feels to me like one of the key parts here from what you presented, Dan, is figuring out which ESSER positions were critical to keep and to move those into the regular budget. It seems to me that's driving, because this is, the highest increase we've had in a long time. I don't remember as a school committee person a higher increase in over 20 years. But it seems to me a lot of it is driven by the fact that the ESSER funding is ending and the needs aren't.
Well, that piece too, but also realize that our non-salaried areas are increased substantially.
Yep.
The overages from the out-of-district placements are very substantial.
Yep.
And well outweigh the cost of adding these positions in itself. So if you just look at that, and right there, even though we're offsetting by adding a substantial amount from circuit breaker, that can't be sustained over time.
No.
But
no.
we need to bring that in for relief now so we can make the moves to stabilize for the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, so we'll open it up to the public. Mr. Zubarak, you're up.
Am I the only public here?
I believe so.
Oh, my God. I'm gonna have to do a job here. As you noted in the beginning, Mark Zubarek, town resident, taxpayer, and concerned citizen. As you noted earlier, I did come to this meeting because I knew it had to be addressed. And one of the preambles to this discussion, I just don't want to be the skunk at this lawn party because you guys are having a good time building the budget, which is appropriate. I don't give you that. The one thing that I just took notes while you were discussing this budget, and very little was said in regard to the education. Did you place any limitations on the budget total that was given to you from the town, or is the town obligated to pay anything and everything that you as a school department will come through with?
Matt, are you asking, Mark, whether we can ask for what we want and the town just has to give it
Like
to us?
there's no limit?
No, you are asking for what you want. I can understand that.
Well, we're asking for what we need.
But, no, what you want. The problem is that there are limitations. This town's budget right now, if you look at the total value of what's spent at town meeting, is 65% of that money is being spent on schools. Whether it's directly on the school committee budget or supporting the school departments like other towns and cities do. So you have right now consumed more than 50% of the allowable budget or appropriate budget that's been collected by our residents. So, the notes that I just took, priorities, you were talking about priorities. Do these priorities meet the needs that you have identified? I think what you're doing, and forgive me if I'm being blunt, I'm always blunt, the positions that have been authorized by these grants from the federal and state government are becoming a budget item on this current budget. You're converting those positions into funded by taxpayers.
A very small number of them, comparatively.
Well,
If
that-
you looked at the earlier slide, I think, Dan, there were 30 positions overall that
At
were
one
funded
time.
at ESSER, and I think we're adding, 8, 9, 10?
It doesn't matter. What I did is...
Well, it does.
No, it doesn't, because what I did is I went through the documentation for the school department for education, and I'm just looking at the last 10 years. And the only department in this town, out of 800 people that are being employed by this town, 464 are employed in the education department. And during the last 10 years, the only item that has increased by more than double digits is the school department. It went up by 20 people, 20 positions since 2014. Now, I can go back further, and those numbers get even worse. The problem I'm having is that we are all concerned and consumed by special education. Special education is a constant issue that's been on the books with this town forever. I mean, that's nothing new. I remember Mary McLaughlin standing in front of the Board of Selectmen and defending her piece of the psychologists, the nurses, and all those kinds of support functions. The one question that I raised then, and I'll raise again, how are we supporting our average student that goes to this school? It seems like everything is being focused in on the low end of the spectrum, and that 90% of the students are being forgotten. And that's what it's Eric, it's not funny. It's serious.
I'm laughing because your premise is not serious.
It is very serious.
If you actually watch our meetings, if you actually look at what we do, you'll know that through the years, the focus is not simply on special education students. The focus is on every student.
Well,
and if you looked at the number, for example, and Adam can tell you more about this, at the high school, the number of AP courses and selections that have increased through the years to try and give more opportunities to students. The
different pathways.
Yeah, absolutely.
that-
So,
and how has that performed? Adam and I have discussed this many times in regard to Essex Tech versus Danvers High School. Danvers High School is losing population. The student population is going down, and the administrative and teacher population is going up by at least 20 over the last 10 years,
So-
to 464.
See,
Now, the issue is that we are not focusing on the detail of the majority of the students.
that's not true.
Well,
It's simply not true.
then prove it to me.
Special education, well, you have to sit and listen and understand, Mark. You are making an assumption based on very little data or information or an unrealistic view of what the schools do. Yes, special education is important. Special education is more costly than regular education, which is why it has a bigger impact on the budget. But to suggest that we're not trying to do anything or aren't doing anything for students who are not special needs students, it's just It's indefensibly untrue, Mark. If you look at the things we're doing,
Then-
did you watch the curriculum presentations?
Oh, yeah, and I have another comment about the curriculum in a
No,
minute.
but that's different. Your comments will be, you don't like the books, or you're thinking that we're too
No,
into.
no, that's
woke
not it at
whatever.
all. I'm looking at the increase in the administrative and teacher costs because you're increasing by 20 people. But when I asked for the curriculum, I was given a stack of paper that was provided by Desi, who is dictating what we teach in our classrooms. So why do we even have the school committee? And that's the issue that I'm having.
Chair,
And
may
my
I-
problem is,
Mark, can
Yeah.
I just address something? Because I think you asked a really important question. I just want to respect you as a taxpayer and just share something that I think was brought up, and I hope you can appreciate it. And I know you mentioned that there's an overemphasis on special education. And if you take a look at the presentation, the main focus is special education because of the runaway cost of special education over the last several years and the impact that it does have on the regular students and staff. And the budget that's being proposed today is all in an effort to offset those cost increases because special education, to Eric's point, is incredibly expensive. And to what Mr. Bauer mentioned a second ago, it costs us on average $100,000 per student that leaves. If we educate the student here in the town of Danvers, the average cost is 19, roughly?
19,000.
Just
Yeah.
under 20.
just under 20.
So I can,
right.
I completely understand and appreciate everything you said, but I think if you look at it in the context of we have to focus on it because we're actually trying to cut the cost and the spend.
The
Because if
issue
we-
is
well, hold on, Mark, I'm
nothing
not gonna
new.
interrupt
No,
you,
the
but
issue
now you're
is
interrupting
nothing
me.
new. It has been discussed and identified over the last 30 years. And the thing that happens is every year, the town pays the bill for special education. Somehow, we manage to do that, but one of the methods is that we're overexpending our tax revenue, up to 65% of it going to school education.
Okay, I just
Now,
wanted to
you
address
also
your
mentioned-
special education point. Can you please agree that what I've shared with you in our efforts to save this town money on special education, where we're talking 100,000 per student out the door versus 19,000, a net of
We-
$80,000 per student to stay in Danvers, is that a cost savings that the residents of Danvers would appreciate?
We have seen this discussion
Okay, I'll end
over
there
the
because
last
you don't want
30
to
years.
acknowledge it, but-
And that's not going to change, and you know it. Every time there's an issue in regard to special education costs, there's a plan in place, and then it fades away because we've tried all kinds of mechanisms, different schools that have taken some of our students in the past, and we've shared in these programs that are in the North Shore.
Well, it's their civil right that they do
Right.
receive an education, so,
They do that now.
right, but we want to keep them home in their home base because.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like your superintendent just said, is that we cannot make it happen overnight.
No.
It takes long-term planning. And the thing is that you got caught up in this special education issue because of the funds that were expended last year. And those funds are partially reimbursed by the circuit breaker. So the thing is that we have to compensate for those costs and not every year just compound those over and over again, because those funds do not necessarily go back to the treasury, they go back to the school department. So,
I don't know even
Okay.
what you're talking about, Mark.
well, that's okay. That's all right. I've been told that before, but maybe what you can do is, this is the reason I've come here today, because I don't see anyone from the public coming and asking questions.
That's
And
fair.
that is an issue. And the thing is that this school committee supposedly is running the school department here. Now, what I'm finding from the information that I've been gathering is that the curriculum is being dictated by Desi. The rules and regulations are dictated by DESI. And the thing is that this school committee always goes along with whatever DESI, asks for. The one question that I have, and I'll finish because this is not going very well. How has all this investment improved the student performance for the taxpayers and for their resources? That's the one thing I did not hear tonight at all, because all we're talking about is how expensive it is, how we want to include additional positions. Now, this has grown by 20 people in the last 10 years. Are we going to show another 5 or 6 this year? That's what it's coming down to. And the one big issue is that I understand you have a tough job, but the problem is that the taxpayers are the ones on the hook for all of this. So we have to consider the taxpayers. And one of the last comment I'm going to make is that I have been told by several individuals, because I'm a father and a grandfather of children in this community, and I have been told by several other people that they will not come to the Danvers school system because they cannot trust it. So you take it from there and go on, but we need to improve this system, because this town deserves better. And it cannot rely on unlimited tax revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. From a special ed standpoint, I can just say that I've received many emails over the last 3 years thanking us and the teachers for building an inclusive environment for their kids. We don't obviously want mediocrity. This is why we have a plan in place.
I'll temper my comments, because ultimately,
Yeah.
I take to heart a great deal our work, and I realize, we have a responsibility financially in knowing that resources are limited. And I showed the slide of what the costs were in 2018 and what they are now. And the feeling is, if we don't do something, we are faced with some serious issues. And this all ties back to all students. So the one thing that I take offense with is when we point out special education, because they're all of our students. It's not just a particular group. So we're working for all of our students. What's good for one is good for all. And that's all that I'm going to say on that piece. I respect the points that were brought up. I respect the taxpayers for sure, because I understand that we are in tight times. And I understand that, the cost of doing nothing would be to sit back and take a look at it and see what happens. But I don't want to be sitting in this chair as the superintendent and not do anything, and then next year faced with making some substantial cuts that do impact all programming. And that's where I don't want to be as the superintendent, and representing not only our administration, but also our families and students too. I want this to improve. I didn't come here for it not to improve. And I'm going to do everything that I can to help sustain and bring change as best we can. And I know it doesn't happen overnight, and I know it's a huge responsibility. I'm happy to take that on with the support of our stakeholders, and I know that it may not make everybody happy, but I do take offense of the fact that they're all students, they're our students, and that's one thing that I was trying to be careful of, the cost of offsetting. I understand all that piece, but if the foundation is not there, or if it's weak, we need to improve that piece and be responsible and do what we can at this point, so that we don't have to keep going and it runs out of control, where we wind up making unnecessary cuts, because we've seen the high school rebound. We've seen applications, and again, it's not a competition with Essex Tech, but it's seeing where we are providing programming that allows the wide variety for performing arts. It allows for the innovative pathways. It allows for APs and for students to extend themselves. So there's no coincidence that the high school has rebounded, and it will happen at the middle school as well.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate the comments, I really do. I appreciate the fact that we're trying to do the best that we can, and it is a tough budget situation. There's no doubt about it. And that's why we took a really good hard look at this and didn't bring forth everything that was on the table. This has been a multiple exercise of that piece. But I don't want to sit here and be in a position where we say, well, we tried and didn't do anything. We have to try and be strategic about it as we move forward into the future, because the future will look much different. And again, it's not just that one slide, that point where we have doubled in cost. And again, it's not special education against general education. We can't go in with that mindset. It's about all students. And I'll stop there because I've rambled long enough, but I feel very strongly about that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
are
Any
we?
other questions?
Huh?
Any other questions or comments
I'm
from the
just-
school committee?
From a process standpoint, are we voting tonight, or are we going to vote at the regular meeting on the 12th?
I mean, it's up to us. I mean, Alice obviously is not here.
Okay.
But,
I think we have to vote
yeah, we
tonight.
should vote tonight because the select board is meeting. Yeah, exactly. Right, so I think that we should.
All right.
I know I missed the last one, she missed this one. I think we've all cut off in some
Sure.
capacity of,
So
what, yeah.
I would suggest that at this point, I'll move to close the public hearing on the budget.
Okay, so,
Second.
okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, none? Okay.
All right, then I will move to.
Oh, before you begin.
Oh, sure.
I wanted to say this.
Yep.
So I know Dan mentioned this at the very beginning. This is all contingent on successful negotiations. I know that we're negotiating 4 different unions right now. And so just please keep that in mind.
Okay, I would not expect the budget to change based on the negotiations, but at this point, I will move
Yes.
that we approve the proposed school budget for $51,990,348.
Second.
Okay, so all those agree, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, none? So it's passed. So we will present this to the select board on March, do you know the date off the top of your head?
I think it's 16th?
16th?
Yes.
Okay.
March 16th is
So
the
that's
selectmen.
the Monday, okay.
Saturday.
Saturday
Yep.
workshop.
Oh, yeah, all right, okay, that's right, thank you. Okay. And then we have our next meeting also is next week, March 11th, here at 6:30 in person. So we have a couple back-to-back ones.
Great.
So, all right, now we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, none. So, good night, Danvers, thank you very much.